I warned my brother not to buy that Dodge. Now he's blaming me for not letting him use my truck. My older brother has always acted like he knows best because he is older by a shade under 2 years. Our parents did well raising us both as equally as possible. But my brother after he moved out on his own got a swelled ego. An apt description is to call him a Chad wannabe, I suppose. While my brother is a Chad, he's not swimming in money. But what money he does have, he doesn't use it very wisely. He's also got a 5-year-old daughter with his ex-girlfriend and has to pay child support, so he lives with a friend in a rundown house that's perpetually full of people smoking pot and eating Doritos. We're pretty sure he's helping his friend grow pot and sell it too. His ex won't let their daughter anywhere near that house, so for visitation, his daughter goes to our parents' house. They adore her, she's a very good kid. My brother often uses her as an excuse to try and get his way on things. I've only owned vehicles I thought would be reliable, like my 03 Toyota Tundra that I bought nearly 3 years ago. It's got a 4.7 V8 engine and over 250 miles on the odometer. Yet it still drives fantastic. I paid $6,000 for it when I got it. Of all things, I guess my getting a truck ticked my brother off. He was driving a Subaru Baja that worked just fine. But I guess the big brother has to have the bigger vehicle. I swear he's had to turn everything into a pissing contest and try to one-up me on everything since I was 18. For example, when I decided to get in better shape and started working out to build some muscle, he decided he was going to become Thor. That's how far he tries to take things. He went out and sold the Baja, then splurged on a 01 black Dodge Ram 1500 4x4 that I warned him not to buy. He acted so proud of it. I suppose it'd have been okay if he got a Ram with a Cummins diesel in it, but no. He got a complete piece of crap that was already way worn out. When he showed me the ad, I looked it over and told him flat out, do not buy this truck. The paint was rough and worn away, especially on the hood. Dents everywhere. Lots of rust, and there were a few other red flags that I pointed out. He acted like I'd ruined his day, and then called the truck's worn-out appearance patina. Which I joked was a good name for the truck. He really didn't like it though. I warned him that he should get a Toyota, a Ford, or a Chevy because they all make much better trucks. But no, he went out and bought that worn-out Ram with over 200,000 miles on it. He also overpaid. He got it for $3,000. He said he didn't want a boy truck like my Tundra, he wanted a man's truck like a Ram. I warned him that the truck was going to fall apart. But he dismissed me. The truck itself was slightly lifted, the rims were rattled and painted matte black, it had a rusty indented steel aftermarket front bumper with a broken winch that had to be cut off with a saw because the bolts were so rusted, the rockers were basically gone from rust, the dash was cracking, the interior looked like there was a knife fight in it, the suspension squeaked a lot, and the tires were worn. I took a ride with him in it, and the shocks felt like they were completely dead, the transmission was slow to shift, and it needed a tune-up. As much as I thought my brother was an idiot, I did want him to at least feel happy with his purchase since he already got the truck. So I helped him work on the Ram. I'm no mechanic, but I could swap some parts. My brother opted to try and fix the rust and paint the truck. One of his friends who owed him a favor knows how to weld, and has a shop we could use. They used some scrap metal to jerry-rig some new homemade rockers on the sides. And make patches anywhere there was bad rust that had to be cut out, not sure how the guy did it. It was a mix of recycled sheet metal and cut tubing. For painting the truck my brother originally wanted to use cheap Rust-Oleum paint. But that crap doesn't set right and doesn't last. So I made him get a better brand of paint. It was just some single-stage black paint/primer in one. I painted practically that whole truck with a $20 Harbor Freight spray gun. Damn thing actually worked pretty well. My brother and his friend handled sanding the frame and redoing the undercoating with spray paint. They had to weld a few rust patches in the frame as well. My brother put in some used aftermarket headlights he found online, which were cheap junk that I knew wouldn't stay looking nice for very long. He refused to get OEM-style ones. He fitted a junkyard cold air intake despite my protests. And went out of his way to install a CB radio that he never used. He put on a bumper sticker that said, Zombie Patrol. I had to convince him to replace the worn tires because the ones that were on it were not safe. They were in pretty bad shape, and to be frank needed immediate replacement. He rolled his eyes at me about it. But ended up taking my advice when one of his friends who's not a complete idiot told him the same thing I did. Later went with him to look at some used tires he found to buy that were stupidly cheap. But they were pretty old, dry-cracked, and cupped all over. For those who don't know what that means, it's when tires get uneven wear up and down because of vibrations and wobbling in the wheels. I said that no mechanic in their right mind would mount those tires because it's a safety hazard, and told the seller that they were not safe to use or sell. He'd be better off taking them to the dump. My brother was not happy with me over that but ended up buying used tires in much better shape from a local business that sold and mounted them. To make the Ram a little better, I put some Lucas stop slip in its transmission, ran 2 cans of seafoam through the gasoline, and 1 more can in the oil. Then I deep cleaned his interior, hand-stitched shut the cuts in the seats, flushed the radiator, and coated the entire inside of the bed with that special spray paint that's specifically made for it. The truck actually looked good. But the engine sounded like crap till I seafoamed it. I warned my brother to go easy on it as I don't trust the engines or transmissions on Dodges at high miles. Of course, he didn't listen. The first thing he wanted to do after getting the Ram's first oil change and tune-up was a drag race with my Tundra. And that old motor oil came out nasty. There were actually chunks of gunk that came out in it. The seafoam likely broke all that crud loose and it came to rest in the oil pan. My brother had to take the oil pan off just to clean it all out. But after all of that and a tune-up, the engine sounded a lot better. So I guess with the Ram running good, my brother felt like that meant his truck was now better than mine in every way. He insisted we race. He had the 5.9 Magnum V8 and I still beat him. I mean, it wasn't even really a contest and my truck is completely stock. Yes, he demanded a best 2 out of 3. I didn't even want to race to begin with but did so one more time just to try and sate him and I won again. But he still demanded another rematch and claimed he just needed to get the hang of the Ram. Well, I refused to race him again, so he started practicing racing down the strip repeatedly on his own with a friend timing him. I guess doing that had some bad effects on the engine because a few days later the Ram started overheating. I looked in the coolant and saw bubbles popping up in the overflow while the engine was running. Yeah, he'd blown the head gasket from flooring the accelerator so much. At 200,000 plus miles on a Dodge engine, it wasn't a surprise to me. My brother was freaking out about it because the truck was undrivable. And he didn't have the money to fix the engine because he'd spent everything he had on everything that had already been done. I suggested running some gasket sealer called Steel Seal in it because it worked for a friend. Well, to my surprise that stuff actually worked, and the engine went back to running normally. But it developed a tick later that got a bit worse with time. My brother drove that truck everywhere. Because he has some stupid need to compete with me, he decided to go camping last summer at the same time and place as me. I have an old camper trailer that a friend sold to me for $500 and I fixed it up. With the pandemic ruining the fun for just about everything, I wanted to get out and enjoy nature for a few days. So you can imagine what my brother did. He went out and got a camper trailer too, and bigger than mine at that. Only it turned out to be in bad shape. And who had to help him fix it before going camping? Me, and his friend with the shop too. But mostly me. Because he wanted to bring his daughter camping with him and he needed his camper to be in better shape. I don't know crap about woodworking. Most of the materials my brother got for the repairs were used shit he found online or laying around. Old used plywood, used pallets, 2x4s that I'm pretty sure were left out in the weather for a while, and more. All stuff he got for free from people in the area that wanted it gone. The camper needed half its floor ripped out, rotten wood in the walls replaced, the roof resealed, a new vent put in, and there was plenty of mold that had to be bleached. We got that all fixed and cleaned up, and then my brother repainted it. Then he went camping in the same place as me, and it ended up turning into a friends and family camping trip with way too many people because he invited his friends and somehow convinced our parents to come along too. Imagine 2 old camper trailers surrounded by tents. That's basically how it was. And during the stay, my brother kept bragging about how he's got a camper and his friends don't, and all the work he supposedly put into it. He didn't mention my helping him once. I called him out on it too, but my brother's friends took his side. Including the one who actually helped with the work. At least till our parents told him to stop being a dick and tell the truth. Then his friends laughed at him, saying he wasn't man enough to admit he had help. Later my brother called me a mama's boy for sicking our parents on him. That made no sense at all. I didn't sick them on him, they did that themselves because his ego wouldn't let him give credit where credit was due. He got drunk and we nearly had a fistfight. My parents ended up taking his daughter home early, and he didn't seem to care. Just gave him an excuse to drink more and smoke pot. The next thing that went out on the Ram after the head gasket was the cold air intake. It was right after the camping trip too and probably happened on the way home. The engine blew open the cone filter because he bought the cheapest one he could find. I wanted to put the OEM filter setup back in. But no, it just wouldn't be cool, as he said. About a year later and the Ram needed a new radiator, water pump, and catalytic converters put in pretty much all at once. My brother complained to me about the cost. And no, needing a new radiator and water pump was not related to the gasket sealer. The mechanic said they were on their last legs for some time already. The dash was also cracking and falling apart so badly that after a while it was practically made of JB Weld and duct tape covered with spray paint. The used aftermarket headlights he was so proud of putting in went foggy as well. He also broke a U-joint in his drive shaft. Not from rough driving either. The U-joint broke at a red light in the middle of town. After all of that, his rear bumper got yanked off. He wouldn't tell any of us how it happened, but I found out from one of his friends. He got drunk and thought it funny to prank someone by chaining their rear bumper to a post. They figured out what he did and moved the chain to his rear bumper instead. He was drunk and gassed it hard enough that the rear bumper came right off. He couldn't report it to the police or insurance or he'd have gotten a DUI. I got a look at the damage, and the bumper was pretty much unusable, and the mounts were sheared. My brother and his friend with a shop found a replacement aftermarket steel bumper that was off of a junk truck and welded it on. Not sure if it was from another Ram, or if they just got any old steel bumper and made it fit. They had to fix some dents in it with a hammer and blowtorch, then rattled and painted it black. My brother refused to say how much that whole mess cost him. I suppose that some good came of it. He's avoided driving drunk since then. Before anyone chastises me for not doing anything about it, I was damn close to anonymously telling local police he was drinking and driving. After all of that, it finally happened. I kid you not, a week before my brother's 30th birthday, he blew out his transmission. Just got in his truck and tried to go to work when the transmission jerked and made a loud noise, then started leaking fluid and died. I told him to just cut his losses on the truck. But he insisted he could fix it. He found another transmission in a junkyard that was untested for like $200 and had it put in. It shifted a little rough, even after the fluid change, so I put Lucas in it for him and it seemed to make it better. But then that transmission died only 2 months later. He looked up the cost of a rebuilt transmission, and it's nearly as much as how much he paid for the truck. Plus the mechanic advised he get an aftermarket cooler for the transmission if he was gonna get it fixed. I think my brother finally had it at that point because he put the Ram up for sale. He's not gonna get a lot for it in its condition. What with scrap metal rust repair, a dead transmission, and an engine tick, its value is heavily diminished. Now he's blaming me and saying I should have prevented him from buying that POS truck in the first place. I reminded him of how I warned him multiple times. What did he want me to do, tie him up and lock him in a closet till someone else bought the Ram? He was adamant he wanted it and refused to listen to me. Our parents have called him an idiot that's just trying to pass the blame on me, because he wanted a man's truck so badly that he didn't consider whether or not it was shit on wheels. He was warned, but he didn't listen. Right now he's putting around in his ex-girlfriend's old Ford minivan, which she pretty much gave him out of pity because it looks like crap and isn't worth anything. And he's got RBF anytime I see him driving it because he hates it so much. With gas and used car prices being so high right now, I doubt he'll be getting a replacement truck anytime soon. My brother then got what he believed to be a brilliant idea. He wanted me to let him use my truck, while I used the minivan he got from his ex, because he claimed to be a laughingstock among his friends now for the vehicle he's currently driving. Well, he hangs out with other people who are just like him, so it's probably true. But he still had to learn no is a complete sentence that day from more than one person. His initial reasoning was that he'd rather be seen in a boy's truck than a chick's car. Any wonder why his ex dumped him? He absolutely went off on me for telling him no. Then actually implied he'd just borrow my keys anyway. I told him if he takes my truck, I will have cops on his ass. I've got a tracker installed, and there's a camera outside my apartment watching the truck. So he's not touching it. He then gaslit me and said it was my fault for getting a truck in the first place and making him want one. I said it wasn't my fault he sold his Baja. Then asked him what entitled him to my primary vehicle more than me just because he's broke. He claimed he needs a better vehicle to get around when he has his daughter. I reminded him that his daughter had no bearing on whether or not he drove a minivan or truck. It certainly didn't mean he needed my truck just for my niece. The minivan was a lot better vehicle for him to be driving his daughter in anyway. Rather than admit defeat, he tried to get help from our parents by calling them on speaker in front of me. And they sided with me immediately, despite his pleas of being a daddy in need of a better vehicle for his little girl. My dad called him a man-child, and my mom told him to stop bugging me as none of this was my fault, and to stop trying to weaponize his daughter to get what he wants. He left in a huff and has avoided speaking to me for a week. Update 1. Brother wants to LS swap his 01 Dodge Ram. And he's upset neither I or my parents will lend him money he'd never want to pay back. He finally admitted the Ram was a lost cause. It wasn't a surprise that he changed his mind. He didn't get any offers for the truck. Mainly because he was trying to ask way more than it's worth. And you can only get so much money out of a polished turd. Since then it's just been sitting in the front yard of the house of potheads my brother rented half a room in. Though actually, he's recently moved into that camper he bought and I helped him fix it because the owner of the house added another tenant. So he gave up his space to live in the camper since it's parked alongside the house and he no longer has to share a room. Gives him more privacy, I suppose. Not sure if I'd trade my apartment for a camper though. Not unless I had to anyway. My brother supposedly gave up on the Ram. But he changed his mind when a friend of his told him they know a guy that offered to LS swap the Ram for him. Now I'm not the most knowledgeable person, but aren't LS small block V8s? The Ram has a big block 5.7 Magnum. Quite a size difference between the two. Then again, I don't know if the 5.7 quite qualifies as a big block either. My brother has his eyes set on an LS V8 engine in the junkyard. Out of what vehicle I don't know. But it's a working engine complete with a transmission and cooling system parts. They want $1,000 for all of it. My brother wants to put that engine and transmission in his Ram. But he doesn't have the money. The guy who does LS swaps has offered to put the engine in for him for $2,000, if he does most of the teardown of the engine bay and gets the old engine and transmission out, as well as all the needed parts ready. So now my brother has been going around asking friends and family to borrow $3,000. No one will lend him the money. Especially not me or my parents. I have the money, but I learned long ago not to ever lend my brother anything because he refuses to pay it back unless you make him. Even then he tries to act like he doesn't remember owing anyone anything. He previously owed me $2,000 already until I made him pay most of that back a year ago. He still owes me $400. I kept records because I frankly don't trust him. Our parents are not in a position to lend my brother money, even if they wanted to. My dad is retired with a bad back and knee. And waiting on approval for government benefits. My mom still works and is the primary earner for the house right now. My brother went to them begging, and they told him no. He made a fuss when they did. Soon after my brother left their house, I got a call from my parents telling me my brother was likely headed to see me next because they refused to lend him money. They said that he tried to use his daughter as an excuse again and that he hates driving a minivan that he refers to as a chick car. Sure enough, a few minutes later I saw his van pull in. He got out and then did some sort of walk around of my Tundra, twice. Yeah, he's clearly still mad I have a working truck and he doesn't. In my previous post, I talked about how he wanted me to trade vehicles the minivan for my Tundra when his Ram died. And then he threw a tantrum when I refused. So until coming to my door to beg for money, he's not spoken to me in weeks. I opened the door and confronted him before he even knocked. I asked him what he wanted. He beat around the bush, then gave me his whole crocodile-teared sob story of needing the $3,000 for the LS swap. I swear, he worded it like I'd be giving money to orphans in need. I mean, he even did the bit with cupping his hands together. Just how much of a sap did he think I was? I told him to stop begging and reminded him of the money he's already owed me for years now. He conveniently didn't remember until I went into my closet and pulled out all of the old IOUs he signed, the total of all those loans I had written down, as well as a dated record of every payment he'd made with a signature on each one. I said I could never trust him to pay back anything and could file to sue him tomorrow for what he still owes me if I wanted to. He was not happy and called me a douche. Then he complained that all he wanted before was for me to lend him my truck so he won't look pathetic. I told him he looked pathetic regardless of what he was driving. And I'll never let him borrow my truck. Nor would I argue about it again. He got mad and said I sucked because I couldn't just give him a little help when he needed a leg up. I laughed and yelled at him that I helped him a lot. Then listed off all the things I could remember doing for him the past 2 years. He was never appreciative, took credit for stuff I did, and hardly ever even gave me a thank you. He took advantage of my kindness and bled it dry. But now I'm fresh out. Then I told him he was the real douche, and I'm never lending to him again, told him to get out and not come back till he was ready to apologize to me. He left without another word. When I watched him from the window he started kicking one of the tires on his van as hard as he could till I think he hurt his foot, because he fell on his ass and then flipped me off when he noticed I was watching. He practically crawled back into the van and drove off. A mutual friend has told me he's depressed now but is going around and looking for ways to make extra money with odd jobs. Nothing wrong with honest work. But I also hear he's still begging for donations. The mutual friend even texted me a picture of a coffee can with "Truck Fund" written on it that my brother has been carrying around. Update 2. My brother decided to make his van into a truck. Asked for money again. I gave him pennies. Is my brother really so obsessed with having a truck that he had to go and do this? Apparently yes. I mean, on some level I applaud his ingenuity when he made this thing. But he could have easily ruined his only method of transportation. Of course, it already looked like shit anyway. I didn't describe it in detail before. But the minivan that my brother's ex gifted him was pretty old and from the 90s, the paint looked like shit, dents everywhere, the rear window was busted out and replaced with plastic, and it has over 200,000 miles on it, and it wasn't worth much. A van like that with that age and high miles could develop a bad problem at any time, so the fact my brother decided to put any money into this conversion I find so weird. You may be asking where the entitled part is in all of this. Well, I'll tell you. My brother went asking our parents for money again. He had basically the same reaction when they refused him last time. He showed up giving them an apology for what happened last time he was there, then basically held his hands out asking for cash. They just told him to leave. Then they called me saying he came to them with the craziest idea of wanting to turn his minivan into a truck. They said they weren't lending him anything. And he literally told them that they just wanted him to suffer. Yeah, he was suffering so much to have a working vehicle that he had to hack it apart. My parents warned me to be on the lookout for my brother. So I waited by the window. He showed up nearly as fast as last time, parked right next to my Tundra, stared at it for a moment after getting out, and then shook his head. I think he was trying to convince himself that he doesn't like it anymore. I startled him pretty good when I opened the door before he even knocked. I asked if he was there to apologize after what happened last time. He acted like there was nothing for him to apologize for. Until I pointed out exactly what from my previous posts. He was basically like, oh yeah. That. The best I got was the most insincere, sorry about that, I've ever heard. Then he went right to asking me for money. I asked him what happened to the money he got from selling the Ram, and he said he wasn't touching that money because it was the start of his savings for a replacement truck. He was hoping I'd lend him some money because he had a fantastic idea. He was gonna hack off the back of his van and make a truck out of it. I said that was idiotic. But it was his van. So he could do whatever he wanted to it. Just leave my truck alone. He went pretty deadpan when I said that. But basically went back to saying he was just trying to make his van cool. Then went out of his way to show me some Google pictures on his phone. I finally had enough and said that if he wanted money so bad, I'd give him some. He looked so happy, until I handed him a canning jar full of pennies. I'd been putting pennies into this jar little by little for 10 years. I like to keep the pennies separate from the quarters, nickels, and dimes. I imagine there was $30 in pennies in that jar at most. He gave me a very dirty look, but still took the pennies. I then told him not to bother me with favors ever again until he was really ready to own up to the shit he put me through and apologize for real. The next part of this comes from what mutual friends have told me. Including the guy who owns the shop. My brother worked on both the Ram and van in. My brother drove that van into his friend's shop and spent a week modifying it. He used an electric saw to hack the whole back end off of it, starting from behind the front seats. If this was some sort of throwaway fun vehicle, I'd get a kick out of it. But this is his primary vehicle. I don't think he can even legally drive his daughter in it anymore because it no longer has back seats. My brother also apparently wanted to cut the exhaust and straight pipe it into stacks too, but thankfully someone had the sense to tell him that wasn't legal and he'd get pulled over. But he pretty much spent a few days cutting and welding on this van. I've seen worse, but I can't fathom why he bothered to put any money into this thing. But he did. I think it's mostly junkyard parts, recycled wood and scrap metal, spray foam, and some spray paint and glue. He had to build a partial subframe behind the seats and weld the rear side doors shut to make it structurally sound. So he didn't completely half-ass it. He made a new backing behind the front seats out of recycled plywood, with a hole cut into it for a plexiglass window that was glued in. He rattle-canned the whole vehicle primer black with some red accents. The homemade truck bed he put in the van was also made out of recycled wood. And he built some sort of tailgate the same way, and also mounted the spare tire on the back of it. He also lifted the van a little. He also managed to find some slightly better tires to put on it. He spray painted the old steel rims red, and the tires he had put on are beefier, but far from new. He also added a some tube frame right behind the cab with a couple of mismatched LED lights on it, and a tow hitch on the back. Oh, and he finished it up with another Zombie Patrol bumper sticker like he had on the Ram. He said that truck is powerful enough to tow his camper. Well, it's got a V6. So why not, I guess. The camper he owns and is currently living out of is pretty small. My brother brought this creation to our parents' house and we all saw it. He called us all a bunch of doubters and then made a big show of gassing that crazy thing up and down the street. He kept yelling it ain't a chick car no more like he was high on his own ego and adrenaline. Then he told us that he planned to lift it more with bigger springs and tires when he gets the chance. Our dad warned him that would be very bad as it's not really a truck, and he could break an axle or something else doing that. Of course, my brother acted like our dad didn't know what he was talking about. He was a tow truck driver for 30+ years. He knows what he's talking about. They argued a little more and my brother said the van/truck was still just temporary anyway until he got a man's truck again. Of course, the rest of us were basically just like, whatever floats your boat, man. Now go away. Well, no surprise my brother's ex refused to let him drive their daughter around in that homemade van/truck because she deemed it's not safe. The girl has to use a booster seat and I think legally needs to ride in a back seat with it because of her age and size. My brother's daughter also wasn't happy to see her mom's old van hacked up either and said she didn't like it. My brother apparently kept trying to convince her it was super cool. It's not. At least not for someone's primary vehicle. A fun vehicle for having a redneck good time, sure. But not a daily driver. He's driving this thing nearly every day to intentionally show it off. And he's extremely proud of it because I guess his friends seem to like it as well. Or at least that's what they tell him. No idea if they're just laughing behind his back or not. The last my brother and I spoke, he basically cornered me after work when I was getting dinner at a Burger King, and was talking like an elementary school kid at recess saying my Tundra sucks because it's so boring, and his van/truck was way cool. Then of all things, he actually wanted to drag race me again. He got pissed when I told him no because he blew the head gasket on his Ram doing that before. If he blows the head gasket or transmission on the high-mileage van/truck too, I'm not gonna help him fix it. Well, he ended up rolling his eyes at me before leaving, and called me a douche yet again before driving off while playing the song Magic Carpet Ride on full volume. He really has it in his head that he's super macho, doesn't he? Update 3. My brother just won't quit. I have more to tell now about how my August went. That crazy van/truck thing my brother built was already bad looking enough as it was. But he's gone and made it even worse. He went out and got some junkyard truck mirrors. I'm talking about the big old ones that are chrome steel and for big trucks of the 70s and 80s. And he put them on his van/truck with self-tapping screws and hot glue. And of all things, he got a Dodge Ram emblem and glued it onto the grill. The van/truck is a Ford for crying out loud. He also replaced the steering wheel with an aftermarket one I'm pretty sure was out of a junkyard vehicle because it was all scratched up. He also somehow found some bigger and beefier rear springs and installed them in the back, then removed the twist studs he already had in the front springs. So the vehicle has quite the angle of attack now. But not so much that I'd really call it lifted. More like mildly raised. Though it's better than how he had the suspension previously. The extra bit of height in the back does help a bit when he's towing something, but the stupidest thing of all he did was he got some neon orange truck nuts and hung them off the tow hitch. I was visiting my parents when my brother showed up in this abomination and went out of his way to show off what he'd done to it. He calls it the mini Ram. Our parents openly said it was just plain stupid looking. I took one look at it and went out of my way to fall over laughing in the grass just because this was so insane. I don't know how he even insures this thing. He called me a jackass for laughing, and I just laughed some more. Our parents and even a neighbor joined in on the laughing and my brother just drove off without another word to any of us. I know I was pretty insensitive to laugh like that. But damn it, it was just too funny not to. My brother went back to sulking, and then went back to looking for odd jobs to make some extra cash. He borrowed Dad's old Harbor Freight utility trailer and started hauling garbage to the dump for people who can't or don't want to do it themselves as a side hustle. On this, I will compliment him, because it's good honest work. I actually heard from a mutual friend that a couple of the people who hired my brother to haul their garbage only did so because they just loved to see him using that crazy mini Ram he built. They get rid of their garbage and get a good laugh. Not sure if it's a win/win for my brother since they laugh at his expense. But he's making money, so I wouldn't care if I were him. He's potentially going to be driving that thing for a while till he can afford to replace it. So he's gonna need to grow a thick skin when people laugh at him. He's not asked I or my parents for money again since the last time. Mom and Dad thought it was hilarious when I told them I gave him a jar of pennies when he came begging a while back. Since then, he has been insufferably irritating. It's gotten to the point I even suggested my brother get a mental evaluation. It started with me deciding to go camping for the weekend. After work on Friday, I hitched my camper up at my parents' house and drove to my usual place. It's by a river, and basically a free area to camp in. I got lucky and there wasn't anyone else around. Then I saw the mini Ram making its way down the road with my brother's camper in tow and another car behind it. The first words out of my mouth were, "Give me a F break." Of course, it was my brother, and a couple of his pothead friends. Just why God? My brother parked in the same campsite as me. And I ended up laying some ground rules since they wanted to share the area. Rule 1, leave me the hell alone. Rule 2, leave me the hell alone. Rule 3, leave my stuff the hell alone. Rule 4, leave my food and beer the hell alone. No surprise they broke all of those rules in just one night. I have a decent portable generator that I use to keep my camper powered, and the fridge cold. I had a stock of cheap beer, and plenty of hot dogs to cook on a mini charcoal barbecue. The first thing is that when I started my barbecue, I was just gonna cook enough hot dogs for myself. But my brother and his friends begged me to let them cook theirs on my barbecue as well because mine was already lit. Fine, why not? Only they didn't bring many wieners. So they ended up begging for some of mine because they ran out fast. They were smoking a lot of pot and had some serious cases of the munchies. So they went through all their food like they were in the middle of an eating contest. I told them tough luck, I only brought enough for myself. They should have brought more. I got a pretty good one-finger salute from all three of them for that. They also were running out of beer on the first night, which I'm sure no one here is surprised to know. I caught my brother trying to steal some out of my camper. He was drunk, but plenty lucid enough to know what he was doing. He just casually walked right in while I was listening to music on noise-canceling headphones, and tried to walk out with a six-pack of talls. But I caught him and made him give the beer back. He did try the, "Oh sorry, I was so drunk I went in the wrong camper," excuse. Which I called bullshit on as he knew exactly what he was doing. He could still talk fine, and wasn't looking like he was about to fall over like he usually does when he's wasted. He just said, "Fine," like a man-child and set the beer down in my camper doorway, then intentionally farted in my direction as he walked off. My brother ended up running down the batteries on his camper playing loud music, and hooked his power line up to my generator without asking and unplugged my camper from it. He doesn't own a generator yet, so he just decided to hook up to mine and waste my gasoline. I didn't notice for a few hours. But when I did, I was pissed and ripped his cord off of my generator and yelled out his name. He just made some drunken excuses, and then said I should be sharing anyway since we were camping together. I said we weren't camping together. I was happily camping alone, and he was a leech who followed me. Then I got all my stuff together and locked myself in my camper for the night. I also locked my generator and gas cans in my truck's canopy so they couldn't get at them. They knocked on my camper door a few times, but I never answered. I had to pound some whiskey I brought in a flask to get to sleep because of all their noise. The next day my brother and his two friends were butthurt because they ran out of beer, food, and power, but I didn't give two shits and refused to let them have anything of mine. What I brought was for me. If they want more, they can drive the 15 miles to the nearest store in the morning and get some, which they had to do with hangovers. I packed well. I had 2 big sandwiches from our local supermarket prepackaged and ready to eat. I had eggs, cheese, and bread to make myself breakfast with a propane hot plate. I cooked scrambled eggs with sliced hot dogs in them, and a grilled cheese sandwich to go with the eggs. And I had plenty of beer and soda remaining. Of course, my brother didn't have any of these things because he didn't come prepared. He just figured he could use my stuff since I was already there. I told him to leave me and my stuff alone, and next time make sure he has enough supplies to at least last the weekend. My brother finally did something smart, and moved his campsite further down the road from mine. We didn't talk for the rest of the time we were there. On Sunday morning though I was woken up to my brother and his friends shooting cans with a .22. They kept that up till they ran out of ammo. It took forever because they were using a single-shot target rifle. I think they were intentionally shooting with it all morning to irritate me. Good thing I have those headphones. Then that evening when I was packing up to go home, so was my brother. It was like he went out of his way to leave just before me so I'd have to convoy behind him the whole way home. Yes, you all know by now from my prior posts that he is that petty. I didn't really care. We were driving to the same place, and he's not a slow driver anyway. I took a different road as soon as I could though, dropped off my camper back at my parents' house, and went home. None of you will be surprised to know though that my brother the next day bitched to our parents about what happened. I ended up giving my side of the story over the phone on speaker while he was still over there because they didn't really believe him. My brother had a total tantrum over that.